Mike, the Luminate 2024 year-end report is out, and you and I were so fortunate to sit down with our friend Jaime Marconette. For those that don't know, he's the VP of Music Insights and Artist Relations over at Luminate, and he broke it all down for us.
Well, we can't say goodbye to 2024 without checking in with Jaime and getting the lowdown on that 2024 report. One of the fascinating things when we were talking to him is, Luminate is tracking about 200 million songs from last year. What's horrifying is 87% of those songs had 1,000 or less streams, and 46% had virtually zero streams. So, remember the old long tail thing? Not so much. Not so much.
This is super insightful. We're just going to let it roll. So here's Jaime Marconette. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Jaime, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Jay, Mike, great to see you guys as well. Thanks so much for having me back. Good to see you.
Let's dive in. The year-end Luminate report has just come out. We've had a chance to start digging through it. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, kudos to you and your team. It's beautifully laid out, charts and graphs. It's just visually appealing, but easy to sort of digest a lot of this data.
Thanks. One of the things that we did, I think, is also try to, throughout the certain sections, we've set them up a little bit. You'll see some on the interstitial pages where we kind of talk about maybe why this, this is here, why this is important. So we really tried to kind of set it up and kind of guide the reader through as well with maybe a little bit of extra context.
Yeah, well done. So let's jump into the first thing that's on everybody's mind, and that's streaming growth. And I'd like to talk to you about the factors that you think contributed to this rate of growth for on-demand audio, ODA, that's streaming ex-US compared to the US this year?
Yeah, thanks. So I think we called this out on our mid-year report as well, but we did see that the US market is, in terms of streaming, is, starting to mature a little bit. It's the biggest market. It's still the biggest market. It's about 30% of overall activity. But at some point, its ceiling is not as high as, say, the emerging markets, right? So it's going to slow in its growth. And so what we've really seen now over the last, year or so is that these emerging markets are really starting to grow faster as streaming takes hold in other areas. There's a lot of factors for this, everything from, the availability of internet service or smartphone technology and those sorts of things really enabling people to sign up for more streaming services. There's a lot that goes into this in terms of sort of those sociological factors as well. But we are starting to see that the emerging markets, the markets that weren't on streaming as so fast in the beginning 10 years ago, are now really starting to adopt and starting to come on more.
Wow. Hey, Jaime, Jay and I have talked so much about Latin and the power of Latin as of late. Can you elaborate on what specific dynamics led to pop overtaking Latin as the fastest growing genre in the U.S. in the second half of last year?
I know it's really pretty amazing, right? And one thing that we're starting to look at fastest growing, and I want to just stop on the methodology there for a second, is in the past we've typically used just percentage change, right? But the thing that was always a trouble with percentage change is that it doesn't take volume into account. So say there was a genre out there that only had 100 streams, and the next year it had 200 streams. Well, would it would have doubled in size, right? It would have been a 100% growth rate, but that doesn't really take volume into consideration. So what we've done now is we're starting to do share point change, because what we're looking at is streaming as one big pie, and all the genres have a piece of the pie. So which genres are growing the fastest in their piece of the pie? Right. So that starts to take volume into consideration as well. And so that's how we're starting to look at it a little bit more. And you've seen that in the mid-year report too. Pop specifically, and I hope people have a chance to download the report and go through the interactive version, because pop specifically was driven by solo female artists, and they just dominate. And we were looking at the top pop artists in the U.S. and we're like, wow, 7 out of the top 10 are female, and then it goes on after that. And then when you start looking at the streaming share, I think the final stat we had is 47 of the top 100 pop artists are solo females, so there's just less than half, yet they make up 64% of the on-demand audio stream. So they're still like out indexing, I guess you could say, or whatnot. And so pop solo female artists have really just dominated that genre this year, and we're really seeing that propel that. Obviously, there's huge stories in Latin. Regional Mexican continues to grow. There's huge stories in actually rock. Rock grew its piece of the pie this year, as did country and Christian gospel the most. But yeah, we did see that pop grew its piece of the pie the most this year, which was pretty fun and exciting there.
Yeah, one of the most interesting parts of this report for me was this cultural impact. And it was fascinating. You have a new metric with this report that ranks countries by their export power. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So this is something we've been working on for a little while now. There's been a lot of industry conversation over the last year or two about different markets, how they're exporting content, what's happening inside of markets, especially, you would have, if you've been following along with some of our reports, we did our language analysis, we did our country of origin analysis. It's really kind of follows suit in this terms of exploration of what's happening here. But what we did this year is we ranked the top markets and territories by their export power. And the report goes into a little bit more of the methodology there, but essentially what we're looking at is the number of artists from a given country, then their breadth and country of origin for them across our panel of other territories, to see the dispersion of artists from a particular market across a global landscape, and then looking at them by different tiers and weighting top tier, the number of artists in a top tier more than a bottom tier, to really get at what the export power is for a country. And if you do this, then, the US comes in number 1. We've ranked the top 10. You see that the UK is there, and South Korea. You also see that Brazil is there in the top 10, as well as Germany and others. And this is all based on the number of artists from those countries and their dispersion on a global setting. And it really helps to start illuminating a couple of things. Number 1, the export sort of cultural impact that maybe a particular market is making through music, right? And not through other goods and services and those sorts of things, but through music. And then also you can start to analyze sort of the trade relationships between countries too, which I think is fascinating. I'll just bring up Brazil as an example. One of the top importers of Brazilian content is Portugal. And that makes sense, right? Because of Portuguese and the language consistency there. So, this also helps to start analyzing sort of the trade relationships between countries as well. It's really exciting. And I encourage everybody to go check out the interactive version, because there's a map and you'll be able to start looking at it and start to see who's importing these countries' content the most. And it really starts to shine a light on, what these relationships are.
Yeah, awesome. If there's anything we've talked about probably for the last 18 months, with every episode of our podcast is talking about super fans. So let's talk about what characteristics define a super fan and how do they differ from casual listeners in their engagement with music?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So super fans, a couple of the really big points to make about the super fans are that, they like to be there first. They like to discover new artists. They like to be, in sort of the marketing terms, they're your early adopters, right? They're going to be there. They're getting excited. They're super pumped up about what's coming next. So they like being early adopters. They also start to use some of their fandom as their own expressions of identity, right? So whether it's a hat with a logo on it or a shirt with a face on it, they're sort of connecting with the artist in a way that it becomes an expression of their own identity as well. And so that's a critical part too. And then one of the things that we've also seen about superfans is they just love being superfans. So they'll engage in communities of superfans. They'll talk to other super fans. But what makes them really, really important is number one, that marketing concept of your early adopters. These are the ones that are going to be finding new music first and then spreading the word about those artists. And then we also see, obviously they spend more, particularly in physical music, merchandise. They also, one of the things that we've noticed is that the number of consumers that we've talked to and we've surveyed, the number and percentage of superfans has gone up. And what's really benefited from that is live music attendance, that we're seeing live music attendance among superfans go up as well over the past year. Probably coming out of the COVID period even more, and starting to attend live events even more than they have in the past. So, really, really important for early adoption, and then obviously what they just kind of mean to the ecosystem and everything from, financially to sharing about artists.
You mentioned live music. In the report, you call out that Gen Z is spending more on live music events compared to other generations. Talk a little bit about that, and what do you see as far as predictions, in the next 1 to 3 years for the live music attendance?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right, with Gen Z. So Gen Z is getting to an age now, a lot of them are starting to be out of college. Maybe they're into their first job. Maybe they're into their, mid-20s. They've got a little bit more spending power than they have in the past. And that we see that overall, they were the biggest spenders on live music in 2024. That this has been something that the millennials have really kind of owned the last couple of years. And so this was the first time in our data set where we started to see Gen Z take the mantle of the biggest spenders on live events. Now, this is really driven by festivals and upping those ticket prices. So the report does have a couple of stats about price sensitivity as well. Just to, there are some things to think through there and some challenges with price sensitivity. We also saw that in the marketplace this year with some festivals having trouble and having to cancel or tours being canceled as well. So price sensitivity is a little bit of a bigger issue. But then also getting back to Gen Z, what's interesting there is that they also have very particular tastes, right? And, we've seen this in some of the, other reporting just on, their, are they drinking as much as previous generations and things like that? But all of these sort of particular tastes of Gen Z makes it an interesting segment in generation to start working through, because if they are going to be your biggest spenders, then marketing to them appropriately is also going to be, of paramount importance as well. So that's, one of the things that we've seen there. And then interestingly, we also started to take a look at in our own consumer research data set. Okay, well, of Gen Z concert goers, what genres of music are they telling us that they over-index on compared to the average American? And where we saw is that some genres like electronic dance really over-index for Gen Z concert goers. And so looking to the future, that starts to raise the question, well, could we see, the EDM live event space start to do a little bit better, or could there be some trends there to watch going forward as well? So looking at the Gen Z and what they're listening to and where they over-index could, provide some guidance about what's to come in the future.
Nice. Jay and I love to geek out on documentaries, and there's such an amazing amount of documentaries to watch these days. Can you kind of provide examples of how music documentaries have actually influenced streaming consumption for the artists featured?
Yeah, so this is really great, and we've covered sync in the past, but I think what we did here that was a little different is on our Luminate film and TV side. Those of you that don't know, we do film and TV as well as music. We launched this product called Streaming Viewership Model. And what it does is for original content on streaming viewership platforms like Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of those, it starts to model out the minutes watched. Variety actually started publishing a chart about the minutes watched. And so from this data, we can actually start to then break down, okay, well, what were the biggest music documentaries of the year? And, I want to call out that, the chart in the report is movies only. So a multi-episode show like I think it was Thank You and Goodnight, Bon Jovi story is not included because it was a multi-episode series. So we're only doing movies. But, what we're seeing is that this, we can start to tie the minutes watched to the impact it has on consumption. We can look at release dates and tie those together. And so The Greatest Night in Pop, the one about We Are the World, that was the most watched music documentary for last year. And then we do take a look at the rest of the grouping, and we actually do a small little case study on the Beach Boys, because the Beach Boys music documentary came out, and right when it was announced, and then when it came out, you can definitely see this global consumption of the group's catalog start to lift. Now, what's interesting also about that is that their catalog, a piece of that catalog was sold in 2021. And so this is also a good example of new ways to think about these historical legacy catalogs where they're purchased and then new marketing activities go in and really drive activity forward as well. So we call it the Beach Boys. They were in the top 10 too, as well as some other features, but it's a really fun list to look at.
Amazing. For sure. Amazing. So let's talk about genre. I learned so much from these reports about genres, and I'd love for you to sort of talk a little bit about niche genres compared to mainstream genres as it relates to streaming.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So, kind of going back to our track streaming pyramid, and those of people who might have seen a couple of our reports will be familiar with this now. The one thing about the track streaming pyramid is it always reveals new things, right? Like there's always really, really interesting things when you start digging into the tiers. And in our mid-year report, we started looking at major versus independent distribution. And then this year, what we wanted to do is we wanted to see, okay, well, at specific tiers, what genres are over-indexing, right? And so we break it down. We've got your 100 million and above and those tiers, and then you've got your lower tiers. And what you start to see is that these more like your blues or your classical or your jazz or those sorts of things, they really start to over-index at sort of the mid-tier level. And what we mean by over-indexing is, okay, if jazz makes up, such and such percent of the overall industry, right, at an industry level, what tier is it starting to then make up more of the streaming at this tier? And that's how we've looked at it. And so it's fascinating stuff. But what we started to find too is that when you start to look at, especially, classical, jazz, blues, these sorts of genres, a lot of music discovery is then occurring via those live shows, either, small club shows or other live music events is where people are starting to, really connect with music. And then also, kind of tangentially on music discovery too, what we've also noticed for some of these other niche genres is pairing a song with a screen, be it through either, streaming video on demand, like we just talked about, or video games, or even, Twitch or other things too. Like that screen and music combination is also really helping drive music discovery too. But, I really, really enjoyed in this report when we started to kind of look at the tiers of the track streaming pyramid to see, hey, which genres are over indexing where. It was a really, really great way to look at it too. And continue to go back to the track streaming pyramid for more and more insights.
Right. Jumping over to physical sales, with the resurgence of physical album sales, how do you think this trend will evolve in the coming years?
Yeah. So, one thing that I want to call out too, and this is in the report if you're looking at it. So, Luminate announced a change in methodology to how we were looking at the independent strata. So, if you're looking at the report this year, you will see that in our metrics section, we've actually broken the independent strata out from the trending. And that's because there are two different ways of looking at these numbers. And because there's two different ways of looking at them, the methodology was not the same. And so we did not, feel comfortable trending something that's not the same. And so what we've done is we've grouped the other physical strata into one bucket, and then we actually pull out the indie numbers, and you'll see their total volumes for 2024 on the same metrics page, but they're broken out. And then we don't trend those against 2023, if that makes sense. Getting back to the physical music side, we did see that, when looking at X indie strata, so excluding indie strata, we saw that overall physical for vinyl sales up 4.3% this year. We did see that CDs took a little bit of a volume drop. I think it was about 5.8%, somewhere in that 5.5-6% range. We found that last year, K-pop was really driving a lot of the CD sales. I think 9 out of the 10 CDs sales for sellers for 2023 were K-pop. I think the other one was Taylor Swift. And, we saw that it was really driving the format. And so K-pop, the release schedule was not as heavy this year. And what we saw is that really started to affect CD sales in general. And so they are down a little bit this year. And getting back to your question, is what we are continuing to see is that super fans are really tuned into physical music, be it whether it's a vinyl record or it's a CD, but they are purchasing more physical than other fan groups. And so we are seeing that this fandom around physical music is really starting to continue to grow and continue to drive it. And, you will also see then that if a specific genre that's driving a format is, just a little lighter on the release schedule, it's going to show up in the numbers as well.
Makes sense. Part of your report deals with brand partnerships, and Mike and I have been talking to a lot of people recently. Jesse Kirschbaum from New Agency, Sam Sadaman from Innovo. It is really important, and more important today when there's not a ton of revenue from streaming for a lot of these artists. They're looking at things like sync and brand partnerships and merch and other things. Talk a little bit about brand partnerships and how brands can leverage insights from this Luminate index to create effective partnerships with artists.
Yeah, so the Luminate index is another new metric actually that we released. We dropped this in October is when we released it. And what it does is it takes several components into consideration. It takes streaming, it takes social, it takes our own consumer research based on questions of awareness and other items. And so there's 5 components to the overall score. And when you look at it as like the average consumer, you end up with a ranking of artists who are the most influential, right? And so Taylor Swift is number 1. But what I think that is so powerful about this particular particular score is that you can then start to slice and dice by different audience groups, because one artist is not going to be as influential to, every single audience. Like, for specific audiences, a completely different group of artists may be more influential to them. So what we've done is we've shown the top artists in terms of influence to overall, but then we've cut it. Well, if you're Gen Z, what happens to the list then? And you start to see artists like Rihanna and other ones start to go up. Or if you're Hispanic or Latino, who are the most influential artists to Latin music fans and Hispanics and other demographics and groups? Because I think the power is the knowledge that not all artists are this equally impactful to all audiences. And so this is where, getting back to your question, if you're a brand, then you can start to look at it, okay, well, this is the demo, this is the group that fits most appropriately with our product. Who are the artists then that match up to it? and getting past just the general average consumers to really start to fine tune your marketing initiatives to the artists that are going to be the most impactful.
Wow. Kind of looking down the road, Jaime, at future reports, what new areas or metrics do you plan to explore in future reports to provide deeper insights into the music business?
Yeah, well, this is also the first report where we start to get into songwriters a little bit. And we start to look at ISWCs. And this was really, really exciting to us. And, what we've looked at is it's related to our, you'll see in the report, it's a little bit related to the export power by country section, because we start to look at, of the top global 1,000 songs, where are these writers from, who are the writers, the songwriters with the most songs in top of the through the top 1,000. So I think getting into this detail on either beat songwriters, which I think is definitely something we want to continue to dig into and shed some light on, as well as these other metadata elements that are critically important, especially in today's global music ecosystem, that are incredibly important, but then also reveal key insights. So, in this report, we start to get into songwriting a little bit, but I think that those elements that really, kind of shine a light on the global music system, especially when you're starting to talk about how metadata can be used to harness those insights, is definitely someplace that we're going to want to continue to dive in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as we wind down here, Jaime, where can people find this report? You talked about the interactive version of this report. I know there's a PDF of this report. Where can people find it?
Yeah, they can find it on our website, luminatedata.com. And from there, they will be directed to be able to view the interactive version, see the data come to life. It moves, it clicks, the whole thing. But then there's also a PDF as well that people can download as well. But that's from our website, luminatedata.com. Obviously, we have the Tuesday Takeaway series too. So anybody who is signed up for that will have received an email notification saying that the report is live too. So that's always a good way to keep up with us as well. And then, obviously the Luminate socials, LinkedIn, that sort of thing too, will have all the links.
Congratulations on such an amazing report. I've only had 12 hours to dig in, and it's going to take a lot longer than that because there's 91 pages. But again, it's not just a bunch of facts and figures thrown at you. It's organized in a way where you can digest it easily. There are charts and graphs where you can tell at a glance how things are trending. Kudos to you and your team.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Jay. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you guys. And, please stay safe and continue to stay safe. We're also thinking about LA a lot through this whole thing. So appreciate your time this morning.
All right. Thanks, Jaime.
All right. Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.